Blood pools beneath Marcus Johnson's body on the courthouse steps. Officer Scott Wilson stands over him, gun still smoking. A black SUV screeches to a halt. Doctor. Raymond Johnson emerges, FBI badge glinting in the Sunday. "That's my son," he whispers. Wilson's face drains of color. "Before we dive into this shocking story of injustice and a father's fight for his son, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. This story will reveal the dark reality of what some families face every day, so hit that subscribe button to never miss these important stories that mainstream media won't cover. Now let's uncover what led to this tragic moment. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the Johnson family kitchen as 15-year-old Marcus Johnson carefully adjusted his tie in the reflection of the microwave door. Today wasn't just any school day. It was the day he would testify in court against 3 white teenagers who had brutally assaulted his best friend Trevor for simply being in the wrong neighborhood after basketball practice. Marcus had witnessed the entire incident, and despite the threatening messages he'd been receiving all week, he remained determined to speak the truth. His father, Dr. Raymond Johnson, watched his son with a mixture of pride and concern as he sipped his coffee at the kitchen island. At 45, Raymond had recently been appointed as the director of the FBI Atlanta field office after 20 years of distinguished service in law enforcement. He was one of the few black men to achieve such a high-ranking position in federal law enforcement, and he carried that responsibility with the same quiet dignity he applied to fatherhood. "You sure about this, Marcus?" "Nobody would blame you if you changed your mind," Raymond said, adjusting his own tie. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. Both dressed formally, both heading toward a confrontation with a justice system that didn't always serve people who looked like them. Marcus squared his shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that Raymond felt a surge of emotion. "Dad, you always taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. If I don't testify, those guys walk free to hurt someone else." Raymond nodded, unable to argue with his own life philosophy, echoed back at him. "Your mother would be proud," he said softly, thinking of his late wife, who had passed away from cancer 3 years ago. The mention of his mother strengthened Marcus's resolve even further. "I know," he replied. She never backed down either. Their moment was interrupted by Raymond's phone buzzing insistently. He frowned at the screen. "It's headquarters. I've got to take this." Marcus watched as his father's expression shifted from casual to intensely focused, what the family called his FBI face. The call was brief but clearly urgent. "There's a situation I need to handle immediately," Raymond explained, already grabbing his jacket. "But I'll meet you at the courthouse by 11:30, before you're scheduled to testify." Marcus nodded, trying not to show his disappointment. He had hoped to have his father by his side throughout the morning. "I'll be fine, Dad. Go save the world, or whatever it is you do." Raymond paused at the door in uncharacteristic hesitation. "Marcus, promise me you'll be careful. Take an Uber to the courthouse, not the bus, and text me when you arrive." The seriousness in his father's tone made Marcus abandon his typical teenage nonchalance. "I promise, Dad." As Raymond left for FBI headquarters, an uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. He almost turned around to insist on arranging security for Marcus, but told himself he was being overprotective. His son was testifying in a simple assault case, not a federal terrorism trial. What could possibly happen at a county courthouse, in broad daylight? Meanwhile, as Marcus finished getting ready, his phone chimed with a new message from an unknown number. "We know where you'll be today. Last chance to forget what you saw." It was the 5th such message that week. Marcus deleted it like the others, but his hand trembled slightly. He decided to honor the spirit of his promise to his father by taking public transportation, but not the specifics. The bus would get him there faster than waiting for an Uber. As he rode toward downtown Atlanta, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A white sedan seemed to be following the bus route, appearing at too many consecutive stops to be coincidence. When Marcus finally arrived at the courthouse, he was 30 minutes early and slightly on edge. He approached the grand stone steps, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. That's when he first encountered Officer Scott Wilson, a patrolman assigned to courthouse security. Wilson immediately fixated on Marcus, watching the teenagers approach with narrowed eyes and a hand casually resting on his holster. "Where do you think you're going?" Wilson demanded, stepping directly into Marcus's path, though other people were entering the building without being questioned. Marcus sensed the danger immediately, the way his father had taught him to. Something about the officer's stance, the tightness around his eyes, the slight sneer when he looked at Marcus, all warning signs. "I'm here to testify in court, sir," Marcus replied respectfully, reaching slowly for his school ID, the only identification he carried. Officer Scott Wilson was no stranger to complaints. In his 12-year career with the Atlanta Police Department, he had accumulated 17 formal complaints for excessive force, with 15 of those filed by black suspects. Yet each time the system had protected him. Internal investigations found insufficient evidence of wrongdoing. Body camera footage went missing. Witnesses suddenly became uncooperative. The police union provided excellent lawyers. And through it all, Wilson maintained his position, even earning promotions that put him in charge of courthouse security details, where he could continue his pattern of harassment with the authority of a badge. When Wilson spotted Marcus approaching the courthouse that morning, he saw what he always saw when looking at young black men. A threat, a problem, something to be controlled. He had no idea this particular teenager was the son of the new FBI field office director. All he registered was the color of Marcus's skin and the assumption of guilt that followed. I.D. Wilson barked his hand, still resting on his weapon, as Marcus approached the courthouse entrance. Marcus carefully reached for his wallet, movements deliberate and slow. "I'm just here to testify, officer. I'm a witness in the Patterson case." Wilson's eyes narrowed at the mention of the case. The Patterson boys were from a wealthy white family with connections throughout the city, including the police department. Their father played golf with the police commissioner every Sunday. "That right," Wilson said, drawing out the words. "And what exactly did you witness?" Marcus sensed the dangerous territory he was entering. "Sir, I was instructed by the prosecutor not to discuss my testimony before I give it." Wilson stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "You calling me sir doesn't change your attitude, problem boy." The racial epithet wasn't subtle. Behind Wilson, 2 other officers watched the interaction but made no move to intervene. They had worked with Wilson long enough to know his patterns and had chosen long ago to remain silent. Marcus thought of his father's advice for encounters with hostile police. "Stay calm, be respectful, don't make sudden movements. Ask for a supervisor if necessary. Officer, I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to fulfill my legal obligation to testify." Wilson's face hardened. "Empty your pockets. Now." This was escalating beyond reasonable procedure, and Marcus knew it. Other citizens, mostly white, continued to stream past them into the courthouse without being subjected to the same treatment. "Am I being detained, officer? Or am I free to enter the courthouse?" Marcus asked carefully, using language his father had taught him about asserting his rights without appearing confrontational. Wilson's expression darkened. "You watch too many YouTube videos, kid. Empty your pockets, or I'll do it for you." Marcus realized he needed his father, or a lawyer. He reached slowly for his phone. "I'm going to call my father now." Wilson's reaction was immediate and disproportionate. "Gun," he shouted, drawing his weapon in one smooth motion, while using his other hand to shove Marcus backward down the courthouse steps. There was no gun, no threat, just a terrified teenager reaching for a phone. Marcus tumbled backward, arms windmilling as he tried to catch his balance. The hard concrete steps knocked the wind from his lungs as he fell. Looking up, he found himself staring down the barrel of Wilson's service weapon. "Please," Marcus gasped, raising his empty hands. "My phone. I was just—" The gunshot echoed across the courthouse plaza, sending pigeons scattering from the rooftop and pedestrians diving for cover. The bullet struck Marcus in the chest, the impact lifting him slightly before he collapsed on the steps, blood immediately spreading across his white dress shirt, the one he had so carefully ironed that morning for his court appearance. Wilson stood over the fallen teenager, gun still raised as screams erupted around them. The other officers finally moved, rushing forward with expressions of shock. "Wilson! What the hell?" one of them shouted. He went for a weapon. Wilson insisted, though his voice lacked conviction as he stared at the clearly empty hands of the bleeding teenager. Bystanders had their phones out, recording everything. Someone was shouting that the boy had been unarmed. Another person was on their knees beside Marcus, a stranger with basic medical training trying to apply pressure to the wound. Wilson began to sense that something had gone very wrong beyond the usual incidents that were easily explained away. The courthouse security cameras had captured everything, unlike the malfunctioning body cameras that had saved him in the past. As chaos erupted around him, a black government SUV screeched to a halt at the bottom of the courthouse steps. The vehicle had barely stopped when the door flew open, and a man in an impeccable suit emerged, his face transforming from professional composure to horror in an instant. Dr. Raymond Johnson took in the scene before him, his son lying in a pool of blood, a white officer standing over him with a gun, and a crowd of shocked witnesses. The FBI credentials that came out of his pocket caused Wilson's face to drain of all color. "That's my son, Raymond," said his voice, barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of a thunderclap. "And I'm the FBI Field Office Director." In that moment, Officer Scott Wilson realized no union lawyer, no missing footage, no police brotherhood code of silence would save him this time. He had shot the son of one of the most powerful federal law enforcement officers in the state. The immunity he had enjoyed throughout his career had just violently expired on the courthouse steps, captured by dozens of cameras and witnessed by scores of citizens who would not be silenced. Raymond Johnson had seen countless crime scenes throughout his 2-decade FBI career. He had investigated terrorism, organized crime, human trafficking, and corruption at the highest levels of government. He had developed the compartmentalization skills necessary to function in the face of humanity's worst impulses. But nothing in his training had prepared him for seeing his own child's blood staining the courthouse steps. For 3 eternal seconds, Raymond froze, caught between the professional law enforcement officer and the father. Then both identities merged into something terrifying in its controlled fury. He moved with precise, deliberate steps up the stairs, each footfall landing with purpose. "FBI, everyone stand down." His voice carried the absolute authority of a man who had spent his life commanding dangerous situations. The local officers, except for Wilson, who seemed paralyzed, immediately responded to the tone of federal authority. Raymond knelt beside his son, pressing his fingers to Marcus's neck, finding a weak but present pulse. "Call a medical evacuation now," he ordered, not looking up, knowing he would be obeyed. Then more softly to his son Marcus, "Stay with me. Dad's here now." Marcus's eyelids fluttered, consciousness already slipping away. "Didn't reach for anything," he managed to whisper before his eyes closed. Raymond removed his suit jacket and pressed it against the wound, his hands steady, despite the storm raging inside him. He could hear sirens approaching already. Someone, one of the court's security officers, was trying to establish a perimeter. Only when he was sure the immediate medical response was underway did Raymond stand and face Officer Wilson, who had finally holstered his weapon but stood rooted to the spot. "Your name, Raymond?" demanded voice glacial. "Officer Scott Wilson, Atlanta PD Wilson," replied automatically, years of conditioning to authority taking over. His face had gone ashen as the reality of shooting an FBI director's son sank in. Raymond's voice remained terrifyingly calm. "Officer Wilson, you are now the subject of a federal investigation for the attempted murder of a minor and witness tampering. I am taking jurisdiction of this scene effective immediately." Police Chief Walter Hayes chose that moment to arrive, pushing through the gathering crowd with the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling situations. "Now wait just a minute," Hayes began, recognizing Raymond from community leadership meetings. "This is an Atlanta Police Department matter. We have procedures." Raymond cut him off with a gesture so commanding that the police chief actually took a step back. "Chief Hayes, your officer just shot my 15-year-old son who was here to testify in a case. He was unarmed and identified himself. This is now a federal civil rights investigation under my direct supervision, and if you attempt to obstruct it in any way, you will be charged accordingly." Paramedics arrived and moved efficiently around Marcus, establishing IV lines and preparing him for transport. Raymond stepped aside just enough to give them room, but never taking his eyes off Wilson. "I'm riding with my son Raymond," told the lead paramedic. But first he turned back to Wilson, whose police union protection instincts were finally kicking in. "I want my union representative," Wilson stated, straightening his spine. "You'll need more than a representative," Raymond replied. Then to the nearest FBI agent who had arrived in a second vehicle, "Agent Chen, secure Officer Wilson's weapon badge and take him into federal custody. I want his phone, radio, and any other electronics before he can communicate with anyone. Read him his rights and transport him to our facility, not local lockup." Michelle Chen, Assistant Director of the FBI Field Office and Raymond's second in command, moved with efficient precision to carry out the orders. She had worked with Raymond for years and had never seen the cold fury now radiating from him. As Marcus was loaded into the ambulance, Raymond turned to the growing media presence with cameras and microphones extending toward him. "My son Marcus Johnson was unarmed and here to testify in a case when he was shot by Officer Wilson. The FBI has taken jurisdiction of this case, and we will pursue justice without compromise. That's all for now. As Raymond climbed into the ambulance beside his son, he leaned down and whispered, "I promise you, Marcus, he will never hurt anyone again." The ambulance doors closed on a scene of controlled chaos. FBI agents securing evidence, local police standing uncertainly between jurisdictional loyalties, media capturing everything, and Officer Wilson being led away in federal custody, his career and freedom disintegrating with each step. Do you think that police departments do enough to remove officers with records of excessive force? Comment number 1, if you believe police unions protect bad officers, or number 2, if you think officers deserve strong protections in a dangerous job. And what about Raymond Johnson? Would you have maintained such professional control if it was your child bleeding on those steps? Or would rage have taken over? Either way, don't forget to like and subscribe to get notifications about the next part of this powerful story. Will Marcus survive his injuries? What will the investigation uncover about Officer Wilson and the Atlanta Police Department? And just how far will a father go to get justice for his son? The emergency room at Grady Memorial Hospital erupted into controlled chaos as Marcus was wheeled through the double doors, medical staff swarming around the gurney, while Raymond jogged alongside, still maintaining contact with his son's hand. 15-year-old male GSW to the chest, BP 70/40, and dropping pulse 120, and Thready the paramedic reported as they transferred Marcus to a trauma bay. A trauma surgeon appeared, already gowned and gloved. "Sir, you need to step back now," she told Raymond firmly. For the first time in his professional life, Raymond found himself unable to follow a reasonable direction. "He's my son," he said, his voice cracking. The surgeon's eyes softened momentarily. "Then the best thing you can do is let us work. There's a private waiting area for families of trauma patients. Someone will take you there and update you as soon as we can." Raymond finally stepped back, watching, as the medical team cut away Marcus's bloodied shirt, the one he had helped his son pick out that morning for his court appearance. A nurse gently guided him toward the waiting area, but Raymond stopped at the threshold. "I need to make some calls. Official business that can't wait." The nurse nodded, understanding, having dealt with law enforcement families before. "Use this room," she offered, opening a small consultation office. "I'll make sure you're updated immediately about your son." Once alone, Raymond transformed. The devastated father receded just enough to allow the FBI director to function. He called Michelle Chen first. "Michelle, I need you to lock down that crime scene. Get every bit of surveillance footage from the courthouse inside and out. Secure Wilson's cruiser body cam service weapon. Get his personnel file, complaint history, everything. I want to know who he's talked to in the last 24 hours. And Michelle, don't trust Atlanta PD to handle any of this. Use our people exclusively." Michelle's voice was professionally crisp. "Already on it, sir. I've secured the courthouse cameras personally. There's something you should know. The system supposedly malfunctioned during the shooting. I'm having our tech team look at it now." Raymond's jaw tightened. "That's not a coincidence. Find out who had access to those systems." His next call was to the Attorney General's office, briefly explaining the situation and requesting special jurisdiction. The AG didn't hesitate. "You have whatever you need, Raymond. This is exactly the kind of case that requires federal oversight. I'll send a team from the Civil Rights Division immediately." Raymond ended the call as a nurse appeared at the door. "Dr. Johnson, your son is being taken to surgery." The bullet narrowly missed his heart, but damaged his right lung and caused significant blood loss. "The surgeon wants you to know they're doing everything possible." Raymond nodded, the professional mask slipping momentarily. "Thank you. Please keep me updated." When the nurse left, Raymond made one more call to his late wife's sister, Elaine, a former federal prosecutor who had left practice to teach law after her sister's death. She had been like a second mother to Marcus since her sister passed. "Elaine, it's Marcus. He's been shot by a police officer at the courthouse. He's in surgery at Grady." Her gasp was audible. "What, how, why? I don't have all the details yet. I'm investigating." "Can you come?" Elaine didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way. 20 minutes. As Raymond ended the call, his phone buzzed with a message from Michelle. Wilson's body camera was turned off during the incident. Checking for dashboard camera footage now. Another piece of the puzzle. another sign of premeditation. Raymond paced the small consultation room, torn between staying at the hospital for his son and leading the investigation personally. His training told him to recuse himself due to the obvious conflict of interest, but his instincts as both an investigator and a father told him this case would be buried without his direct involvement. His phone rang again. Michelle. Sir, I've got preliminary findings from Wilson's personnel file. 17 excessive force complaints, 15 against black suspects. All dismissed. His body camera has malfunctioned during 3 previous incidents. And there's more. He was specifically requested for courthouse duty today by Commissioner Kendrick himself. Commissioner James Kendrick, the highest-ranking police official in Atlanta, and a man with political aspirations. Raymond had met him only once at a community policing initiative that had felt more like a photo opportunity than a genuine reform effort. Michelle, I want surveillance on Kendrick immediately. Legal surveillance, he emphasized. And I need to know why Wilson was specifically placed at the courthouse today when my son was scheduled to testify. Hours passed in a blur of phone calls, updates, and growing evidence of a conspiracy far larger than a single racist officer. Elaine arrived bringing coffee and her legal expertise. Together they waited for news about Marcus while Raymond continued directing the investigation remotely. Finally, the surgeon appeared still in operating scrubs, with a surgical cap covering her hair. Dr. Johnson, your son is in recovery. The surgery was successful. We removed the bullet and repaired the damage to his lung. He lost a lot of blood, but he's young and strong. He's not out of danger yet, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Raymond felt his knees weaken slightly with relief. When can I see him? He'll be in recovery for another hour. Then we're moving him to the ICU. You can see him briefly once he's settled there, but he'll be heavily sedated. As the surgeon left, Raymond's phone buzzed with another update from Michelle. Sir, we've recovered deleted security footage from a backup system. It clearly shows Marcus with his hands up when Wilson fired. But there's something else. It appears Wilson received a call just minutes before Marcus arrived at the courthouse. We're tracing it now. The pieces were starting to come together, painting a picture far more disturbing than a single officer's racism. Meanwhile, at FBI headquarters, Michelle Chen was reviewing Wilson's file more thoroughly when she noticed something odd, a pattern of interventions whenever Wilson faced serious consequences. The same names appeared repeatedly: Commissioner Kendrick, Police Chief Hayes, and oddly a judge named Robert Patterson. The name rang a bell. Michelle did a quick search and found the connection. Judge Patterson was the father of the 3 teenagers Marcus was scheduled to testify against today. She immediately called Raymond. Sir, I think Marcus was targeted specifically because of his testimony. The boys he witnessed assaulting his friend, they're Judge Robert Patterson's sons. And Patterson has connections to Commissioner Kendrick and Chief Hayes. There's a pattern of them intervening whenever Wilson gets in trouble. Raymond closed his eyes, the full scope of the conspiracy beginning to take shape. Michelle, I need you to secure all records of communications between Patterson, Kendrick, and Hayes, and find out if Wilson has any direct connection to the Patterson family. As he ended the call, a nurse appeared to take him to the ICU where Marcus had been settled. His son lay unconscious, connected to monitors and tubes, looking impossibly small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. Raymond took his hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines. I'm here, Marcus, he whispered, and I promise you everyone responsible for this will face justice. The press conference called by Police Chief Walter Hayes was hastily arranged in the plaza outside police headquarters, strategically timed to make the evening news cycle. A forest of microphones stood before him as he adjusted his uniform and squared his shoulders for the cameras. This afternoon, a tragic incident occurred at our county courthouse, involving one of our officers and a juvenile suspect. Hayes began deliberately using the word suspect rather than victim. While we are cooperating fully with the ongoing investigation, I must express my deep concern about the unprecedented federal overreach in what is clearly a local police matter. Officer Scott Wilson, a decorated 12-year veteran of our force, acted according to his training when confronted with what he perceived as a threat. Raymond watched the press conference from Marcus's hospital room, his expression darkening with each calculated misrepresentation. Hayes continued his voice, taking on a tone of injured professional pride. Furthermore, I feel it necessary to provide some context that has been omitted from initial reports. The juvenile in question has a sealed record for a previous incident involving threatening behavior toward school officials. Elaine gasped beside Raymond. That's a sealed juvenile record from when Marcus was 11, and got into a shoving match on the playground. How dare they access that, let alone make it public? Hayes was building toward his conclusion. While we all regret that a young man was injured, we must remember that our officers make split-second decisions in potentially dangerous situations. The FBI's involvement, particularly given Director Johnson's obvious conflict of interest, represents a troubling precedent of federal agencies usurping local authority. We call upon the Department of Justice to assign an impartial investigator. Raymond's phone rang immediately, his supervisor in Washington. Raymond, I'm watching Hayes right now. Tell me you're recusing yourself from this investigation. Raymond had anticipated this call. Sir, with respect, I'm not stepping aside. Hayes just illegally accessed and publicly disclosed my son's sealed juvenile record from elementary school to smear him. They're actively tampering with evidence. If I step aside, they'll bury this case. A heavy sigh came through the phone. You know I can order you to recuse yourself. Yes, sir. And then I'll resign my position and pursue this as a private citizen with full media engagement. Or you can let me do my job with appropriate oversight. A long pause followed. You'll have a DOJ oversight team by morning. Don't make me regret this, Raymond. As Raymond ended the call, Michelle entered the hospital room with a tablet in hand. Sir, we've recovered Wilson's personnel file. The complete one, not the sanitized version APD provided initially. You need to see this. The file revealed a pattern more disturbing than they had imagined. Wilson had been transferred between 3 different police departments in Georgia, each time after serious incidents involving excessive force against minorities. Each department had allowed him to resign rather than face disciplinary action. Commissioner Kendrick had personally intervened to hire Wilson in Atlanta, despite red flags in his background check. Most damning of all were performance reviews, praising Wilson's proactive approach in high-crime areas, coded language for aggressive policing in predominantly black neighborhoods. There's more, Michelle continued, swiping to another document. Judge Patterson presided over 2 civil cases against Wilson for excessive force. He dismissed both with prejudice. And get this, Wilson has been specifically assigned to courthouse duty on days when witnesses were testifying against prominent citizens 8 times in the past year. Raymond looked up sharply. He's their enforcer. They use him to intimidate witnesses. A soft voice from the hospital bed startled them both. He said I was in the wrong place. Marcus had regained consciousness, his voice weak but clear. Raymond was instantly at his side. Marcus, don't try to talk too much. You're going to be okay. Marcus shook his head slightly. Need to tell you. Before he shot me, Wilson said something. He said, wrong place, wrong kid. Like he was surprised. Raymond exchanged a significant look with Michelle. He wasn't expecting you specifically. He was expecting someone else. Marcus nodded weakly. The witness list got changed yesterday. I was supposed to testify Friday. Michelle was already dialing her phone. I'm checking who else was scheduled to testify today. As Marcus drifted back to sleep, exhausted by the brief conversation, Raymond's mind raced with new possibilities. They're targeting witnesses in multiple cases. This is bigger than just Marcus or the Patterson case. Michelle ended her call, her expression grim. Sir, a witness in a drug trafficking case against Alexander Dimitri was scheduled to testify this morning but never showed up. Dimitri has known connections to Commissioner Kendrick through campaign donations. The pieces were falling into place rapidly now. Wilson wasn't just a racist cop who shot a black kid. He's part of a systematic effort to obstruct justice. And my son was caught in the crossfire because the witness list changed. Elaine, who had been quietly taking notes throughout, finally spoke up. Raymond, this is RICO territory now. Organized corruption throughout multiple levels of law enforcement and the judiciary. Raymond nodded. And that's exactly how we're going to pursue it. Michelle, I want a full financial investigation into Kendrick, Hayes, Judge Patterson, and Wilson. Follow the money. As Raymond resumed his seat beside Marcus, his phone buzzed with an alert from building security. Sir Mayor Williams is here asking to see you. The mayor's timing was suspicious at best. Have him escorted up, but he doesn't enter this room. Set up the family consultation room for a meeting. Minutes later, Raymond faced Mayor Calvin Williams across a small table. The mayor, usually polished and camera-ready, looked genuinely distressed. Raymond, I came as soon as I heard about Marcus. How is he? Raymond studied the mayor carefully. He'll recover. No thanks to your police department. Williams winced. That's partly why I'm here. This situation is spiraling out of control. The police union is up in arms. Hayes is crying. Federal overreach protesters are gathering downtown. We need to handle this carefully for everyone's sake. There it was, the political calculation disguised as concern. Handle it carefully, Raymond repeated. And what exactly does that mean, Mayor Williams? The mayor leaned forward. Look, Raymond, we both want justice. But a protracted, high-profile federal investigation into the Atlanta PD will tear this city apart. The economic impact alone, Raymond cut him off. My son was shot while unarmed with his hands in the air. The officer who shot him has a history of racism and excessive force. That officer was placed at the courthouse specifically to intimidate witnesses. And now, I'm uncovering connections to organized crime. So, tell me, Mayor Williams, what part of this should I handle quietly for the city's sake? The mayor paled slightly. I had no idea it went that deep. Raymond wasn't convinced. Then, you haven't been paying attention. Or you've been looking the other way. Either way, this investigation will proceed with full federal resources. The corruption in this city nearly killed my son, and I'm going to root it out completely. As the mayor left visibly shaken, Raymond wondered how many other city officials were implicated in the growing conspiracy. The so-called blue wall of silence was proving to be more than just officers protecting their own. It was a sophisticated system of corruption, reaching the highest levels of city government. And his son had nearly died because of it. The first death threat arrived via text message at 3:15 in the morning, while Raymond dozed in the uncomfortable chair beside Marcus's hospital bed. The phone's vibration jolted him awake, hand automatically reaching for his weapon before remembering where he was. The message was simple. Back off, or next time we don't miss. We know where your family sleeps. Raymond forwarded the message to the FBI technical team, for tracing his face betraying no emotion. By dawn, the threats had escalated. Raymond's home address had been posted on a police message board with the comment, "Race traitor lives here." Unmarked vehicles had been spotted driving slowly past his house. The FBI had quietly established a security perimeter around both the hospital and Raymond's home, but the message was clear. The corruption he was investigating had deep roots and dangerous defenders. Raymond was reviewing security footage with Michelle when an alarm sounded from the nurse's station. Medical personnel rushed toward Marcus's room, prompting Raymond to sprint down the hallway. Inside, a nurse was restraining a man in scrubs while another checked Marcus's vital signs. He was tampering with the IV, the nurse explained, maintaining her grip on the struggling man. I came in to check vitals and caught him injecting something into the line. FBI agents stationed outside the room quickly took custody of the man who maintained he was a physician's assistant. Raymond checked Marcus, who remained unconscious but stable. Get the contents of that syringe analyzed immediately, he ordered, and move Marcus to a secure location. No personnel access without direct verification from Dr. Wallace. Within the hour, Marcus had been transferred to a secure medical suite within the FBI building, with Dr. Wallace personally overseeing his care. The analysis of the syringe confirmed their worst fears, a lethal dose of potassium chloride that would have stopped Marcus's heart and appeared as a natural complication. The would-be assassin was identified as Kevin Morris, a former paramedic with no hospital affiliation but with a brother on the Atlanta police force. As Raymond coordinated the expanded investigation, Wilson's police union attorney held an impromptu press conference on the courthouse steps, the same location where Marcus had been shot. Officer Wilson has served this community with distinction for 12 years, the attorney declared to the assembled reporters. The rush to judgment in this case is unprecedented and appears motivated by FBI Director Johnson's personal vendetta rather than facts. Let's remember that Marcus Johnson has a history of disciplinary issues at school and resisted legitimate law enforcement commands. The character assassination was deliberate and calculated. Across the city, two distinct protest movements formed, one demanding justice for Marcus and accountability for police violence, the other supporting Wilson and decrying federal overreach. The division largely fell along racial lines, exposing the city's unhealed wounds of segregation and discrimination. Raymond returned home briefly to collect clothes and personal items, finding his front door spray-painted with racial slurs and the windows shattered. Inside furniture had been overturned and walls defaced with threats. The violation of his personal space should have angered him, but instead it only strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about a system of corruption and racism so entrenched that its beneficiaries would resort to intimidation, character assassination, and attempted murder to protect it. Back at FBI headquarters, Michelle was analyzing Wilson's phone records when she made a disturbing discovery. Sir Wilson received a call at 8:27 the morning of the shooting, just 3 minutes before Marcus arrived at the courthouse. The call came from a burner phone, but it pinged off a cell tower near police headquarters. Raymond leaned forward. Who was at headquarters that morning? Michelle pulled up the security log. Commissioner Kendrick arrived at 7:45. He was in his office until 9:30. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He called Wilson, told him to watch for someone specific. But Marcus wasn't the intended target. The investigation was expanding by the hour, revealing layers of corruption throughout Atlanta's power structure. Financial records showed unexplained payments to Commissioner Kendrick from shell companies linked to organized crime. Judge Patterson had dismissed cases against these same criminal enterprises 26 times in the past 5 years. Police Chief Hayes had systematically buried complaints against officers who were connected to Kendrick. Meanwhile, Marcus's condition had stabilized enough for him to be more alert. When Raymond visited that evening, his son was sitting up slightly in bed watching the news coverage of his own shooting. "They're saying I threatened that officer," Marcus said quietly. "Saying I had a weapon." Raymond took his son's hand. "We have the footage, Marcus. It clearly shows you were unarmed with your hands up. Wilson is going to prison for this." Marcus shook his head slightly. "It's bigger than Wilson, isn't it? That's why someone tried to kill me here in the hospital." Raymond had hoped to shield Marcus from the full scope of the danger, but his son's perceptiveness made that impossible. "Yes, Wilson is part of a corrupt system. The people at the top are worried about what you might have seen or heard." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "The Patterson boys. When they jumped Trevor, they were making a drug deal. I heard them mention someone named Dimitri. That's why they attacked Trevor. He saw the drugs." Raymond felt a chill. Alexander Dimitri, the drug trafficker connected to Commissioner Kendrick. The same man whose case had a witness scheduled to testify the day Marcus was shot. "Did you tell anyone about this?" The prosecutor, Marcus, shook his head. "No. I was just supposed to testify about the assault. I didn't think the drug stuff was relevant." "It's all connected," Raymond realized aloud. "The Pattersons, Kendrick, Dimitri. They're all part of the same corruption network, and you're a threat to all of them." Later that night, as Raymond was reviewing evidence in a conference room adjacent to Marcus's secure medical suite, Michelle burst in without knocking. Sir Marcus's condition just got added to the police band. Someone leaked his location. Raymond was on his feet instantly. "Lock down the building. No one in or out without level 1 clearance." The building's security protocols engaged immediately, but Raymond's instincts told him the threat wasn't external this time. Michelle, who had access to Marcus's status information, Michelle checked the security logs. Only our immediate team, the medical staff, and... She paused, her expression changing. "And me. I updated the secure server with his condition an hour ago." Raymond studied his second-in-command carefully. "And who else has access to your login credentials?" Michelle's face remained professionally blank. "No one should have access." "But someone does," Raymond concluded. "Someone high enough in our organization to bypass normal security." The implications were staggering, corruption reaching into the FBI itself. How deeply did this network of corruption extend? And who could Raymond trust when the investigation threatened powerful people in law enforcement, judiciary, and possibly within the Bureau itself? Are you starting to see how deep this corruption goes? Comment number 1 if you think Raymond should trust Michelle, or number 2 if you believe she might be compromised. And what about Marcus? Should he be moved again, or is he safest right where he is under FBI protection? Don't forget to like and subscribe to get notified when the next part of this shocking story drops. Will Raymond discover who's really pulling the strings? Is anyone in Atlanta's power structure clean, or has corruption infected every level of government? And most importantly, will Marcus survive as the powerful people who want him silenced get more desperate? The secure FBI server logs confirmed Raymond's growing suspicion. Someone had accessed Michelle Chen's credentials remotely at 2:17 that morning, precisely when Marcus's updated condition was leaked to the police. Banned. The breach was sophisticated, executed with insider knowledge of FBI security protocols, which narrowed the list of potential suspects dramatically. Raymond called an emergency meeting with only his most trusted agents, deliberately excluding Michelle. We have a security breach. At the highest levels, he informed the small group gathered in a specially swept conference room. Someone with advanced clearance is feeding information to our targets. From this moment, we operate on a need-to-know basis only. All communications regarding Marcus or the investigation go through me directly. No exceptions. Agent Terrell Washington Raymond's longtime colleague from his early FBI days raised the question everyone was thinking. Sir, what about Assistant Director Chen? She's been coordinating half the investigation. Raymond maintained a neutral expression. Michelle will continue her work, but with monitored access. I need someone to keep eyes on her without raising suspicion. The assignments were distributed, and a parallel investigation launched, one that would remain hidden even from most FBI personnel. Raymond then turned his attention to securing his son, who was recovering but still vulnerable. He arranged for a trusted agent to pose as Marcus while his son was secretly transferred to a secure location known only to Raymond and Agent Washington. Marcus, groggy but alert during the transfer, gripped his father's hand. Dad, I remembered something else about the courthouse. Just before Wilson shot me, he got a text. He seemed surprised when he looked at me afterward, like I wasn't who he expected. This confirmed Raymond's theory that Marcus had been mistaken for another witness. We'll add it to your statement, but for now, focus on recovering. Raymond didn't share his growing concerns about internal betrayal. His son had enough to worry about. Back at FBI headquarters, Raymond implemented the next phase of his strategy, deliberately feeding different pieces of information to different team members to identify the leak. To Michelle, he mentioned a plan to move Marcus to Emory Hospital the following morning. To another agent, he spoke of new evidence against Judge Patterson. To a third, he referenced a witness willing to testify against Commissioner Kendrick. Then he waited to see which information would leak. The answer came swiftly. Within 2 hours, armed men were apprehended by Raymond's plainclothes agents while staking out the route to Emory Hospital. The leak was confirmed. Michelle Chen was compromised. Rather than confront her immediately, Raymond decided to use this knowledge to his advantage. He called Michelle into his office, deliberately leaving a file on his desk containing falsified evidence that would seem to clear Commissioner Kendrick of direct involvement. Michelle, I need you to coordinate with DOJ on the Wilson prosecution. I'm focusing on Marcus's protection personally. As soon as Michelle left, Raymond contacted Agent Washington. Stay on her. I want to know who she contacts. The trap was set. Meanwhile, Marcus had recovered enough to provide a complete statement about the shooting. FBI agents recorded his testimony in the secure location, creating an official record that couldn't be lost or altered. His detailed account of Wilson's actions, the threats he had received before testifying, and the conversation he overheard about Alexander Dmitri provided crucial links in the conspiracy investigation. I want to help more, Marcus insisted after finishing his statement. This isn't just about me anymore. Raymond was simultaneously proud and concerned by his son's determination. The best thing you can do is recover and stay safe. Your testimony has already given us what we need. What Raymond didn't share was the growing pressure from Washington. His supervisor had called that morning voice tight with political tension. Raymond, this investigation is stepping on powerful toes. The Georgia senators are calling it a witch hunt. The police union is threatening a work stoppage. You need to focus narrowly on Wilson and leave the broader corruption allegations to public integrity. Raymond had pushed back firmly. Sir, with respect, this is all connected. Wilson was the enforcement arm of a corrupt system involving the police commissioner, judges, and possibly federal officials. If we only prosecute Wilson, we're allowing the architects of this corruption to continue operating. The supervisor's response was telling. Sometimes we have to settle for the wins we can get, Raymond. Politics is part of this job. Raymond had ended the call more convinced than ever that the corruption reached higher than he had initially suspected. Department of Justice officials arrived the next day, ostensibly to assist with the investigation, but clearly sent to monitor Raymond's actions. The lead DOJ attorney, Sandra Michaels, made their position clear in their first meeting. Director Johnson, we understand your personal connection to this case, but objectivity is essential. Our primary focus must be on the shooting itself, not these broader conspiracy theories. Raymond maintained his professional demeanor. These aren't theories, counselor. We have financial records linking Commissioner Kendrick to organized crime evidence of Judge Patterson, dismissing cases against those same criminal enterprises, and Wilson's role as their enforcer. This is a RICO case, not an isolated shooting. Michaels remained unmoved. Your evidence of this broader conspiracy is circumstantial at best. We risk losing the case against Wilson if we overreach." The message was clear. Powerful people wanted this investigation contained. Raymond appeared to acquiesce, but continued his parallel investigation quietly. The surveillance on Michelle quickly paid dividends. That evening, she was observed meeting Commissioner Kendrick in a parking garage, handing over what appeared to be a file. Agent Washington photographed the exchange and followed Kendrick afterward, documenting another meeting with Judge Patterson at an upscale restaurant. Raymond now had proof of Michelle's betrayal and the connection between key figures in the conspiracy. The final piece fell into place when Marcus identified a second officer present during his shooting, Officer Paul Brennan, who had stood by while Wilson fired. Agent Washington located Brennan, who was on administrative leave and drinking heavily at a bar on the outskirts of Atlanta. "I can't live with it anymore," Brennan confessed after Washington identified himself. The kid had his hands up. Wilson knew it. I knew it. But saying anything means career suicide in this department. Washington offered him protection and immunity in exchange for testimony, which Brennan accepted with visible relief. "It goes all the way to the top," he confirmed. "Wilson gets assignments directly from Kendrick." We all knew not to interfere with his special details at the courthouse. By morning, Raymond had assembled enough evidence for a RICO case against the core conspiracy, but he knew presenting it through official channels would likely result in obstruction from compromised officials. He made the difficult decision to bypass standard procedures, contacting the state attorney general directly with his evidence. The attorney general, a career prosecutor with gubernatorial ambitions, recognized both the strength of the case and the political opportunity it presented. "This will ruffle some powerful feathers," she warned during their secure call. "But if your evidence is as solid as you say, I'll convene a special grand jury. We'll need to move quickly and quietly." Raymond agreed, providing her with secure copies of all the evidence, including Marcus's testimony, the financial records, and Officer Brennan's statement. The final confrontation with Michelle came later that day. Raymond called her into a secure room, where Agent Washington waited with the surveillance photos. "Assistant Director Chen, we have photographic evidence of you meeting with Commissioner Kendrick and passing classified information. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice conspiracy and violation of your oath of office." Michelle's composure cracked only slightly. "You don't understand the pressures, Raymond. They have leverage on everyone. This goes higher than you can imagine." Raymond leaned forward. "Then tell me, who's really behind this?" Michelle shook her head. "I can't. They'll destroy my family." As she was led away in handcuffs, Raymond wondered just how far up the corruption reached and whether he was prepared for the answer. The pre-dawn raid, coordinated by Raymond Johnson and the state attorney general, swept through Atlanta like a cleansing storm. 26 simultaneous arrests targeted the key figures in the corruption network, from Commissioner Kendrick and Judge Patterson to mid-level police officials and court administrators who had facilitated the conspiracy. The scale of the operation, involving FBI agents, state investigators, and federal marshals, ensured that no warnings could be passed, no evidence destroyed, no suspects could flee. Raymond personally supervised the arrest of Commissioner Kendrick, taking grim satisfaction in reading the charges: racketeering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, attempted murder, and witness tampering. "This isn't just about my son anymore," Raymond told the handcuffed commissioner as he was led to a transport vehicle. "This is about every person your corrupt system has victimized." At the federal courthouse, a different one from where Marcus had been shot, a secure grand jury proceeding began hearing evidence within hours. The case Raymond presented through the state attorney general was meticulous, built on financial records, surveillance, witness testimony, and the evidence provided by Officer Brennan. The central thread connecting all aspects was clear: a sophisticated operation to protect Alexander Dimitri's drug trafficking enterprise through systematic corruption of Atlanta's justice system. Wilson had not shot Marcus because he was black, though Wilson's racism had made him an ideal tool. He had shot Marcus because Marcus was mistaken for another witness who had information about Dimitri's operation. The racial element had simply provided a convenient explanation that would be accepted by a department accustomed to excessive force against minorities. Marcus, now recovered enough to move independently, though still weakened, was brought to a secure location to provide testimony to the grand jury. His account was powerful in its clarity. The threats before his testimony, Wilson's words before shooting the conversation he had overheard about Dimitri's drug operation. I kept thinking it was just about me being Black Marcus, explained to the jurors. And that was part of it. Officer Wilson saw me as a threat because that's how he sees all black people. But this was bigger. They tried to kill me to protect their criminal operation, and they used racism as their cover. As the grand jury proceeded, Wilson recognized the futility of his position and made the pragmatic choice to cooperate. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided devastating testimony about the entire operation, how Kendrick would personally call him before important court cases to identify witnesses who needed to be discouraged, how Judge Patterson would dismiss cases or suppress evidence against connected defendants, how the mayor's office would redirect police resources away from investigations that threatened Dimitri's territories. I was chosen because of my record, Wilson admitted during his debriefing. They knew no one would question if I got rough with another black kid. The department always protected me before. I was their perfect weapon because my racism made me predictable. The financial investigation led by Agent Washington revealed the full scope of the corruption. Commissioner Kendrick had received over $2 million through shell companies linked to Dimitri. Judge Patterson had offshore accounts holding similar amounts. Even Mayor Williams, who had pleaded ignorance to Raymond, had received campaign contributions through untraceable sources connected to the drug operation. Michelle Chen's betrayal proved to be more complicated than simple corruption. During her interrogation, she finally revealed the leverage used against her. Her brother, struggling with addiction, had been caught selling drugs by Kendrick's officers. Rather than arrest him, they had used him as an informant and threatened to expose his activities and frame him for larger crimes unless Michelle cooperated. I never wanted anyone to get hurt, she insisted tearfully. They told me they just needed information about witnesses. By the time I realized what they were doing, I was already compromised. Raymond found himself torn between professional duty and personal understanding. Michelle had betrayed her oath, but she had been manipulated through her family, something Raymond understood all too well. Your cooperation will be noted, he told her, but there will still be consequences. As the grand jury indictments were handed down against 34 defendants ranging from Wilson and other officers to Commissioner Kendrick, Judge Patterson, and several high-ranking city officials, Raymond received an unexpected call from the Attorney General herself. Raymond, you've done exceptional work here. The evidence is overwhelming. But you should know, there's pressure building from the governor's office to handle this quietly. Apparently, the governor had close ties to some of the defendants. The implicit suggestion was clear. Powerful forces wanted this case contained the charges, reduced the conspiracy framed as a few bad actors rather than systemic corruption. Raymond's response was immediate and firm. Madam Attorney General, this case will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Any attempt to minimize these crimes or protect the guilty will be met with my immediate and public resignation, followed by a press conference detailing every aspect of this conspiracy and any attempt to cover it up. The silence on the other end was brief but pregnant with consideration. I was hoping you'd say that the Attorney General finally responded. The governor needs to understand that the old ways of handling these situations are over. I'll communicate your position. Marcus's health continued to improve. As the case progressed, his physical recovery mirroring the healing that the investigation promised for the city. When Raymond visited him at the secure location where he was still being protected, he found his son sitting up in bed watching news coverage of the arrests. They're actually calling it what it is. Marcus observed, gesturing to the television, where a reporter discussed systematic corruption and racism in the Atlanta justice system. Not just a few bad apples or an isolated incident. Raymond sat beside his son. That's because we have the evidence to prove it was the system, not just individuals. Wilson was a racist, but he was also a tool used by non-racist people who simply wanted power and money. They used racism as their cover. Marcus considered this. So it's not either corruption or racism, it's both working together. Exactly. Racism made their corruption more effective because people were already primed to believe certain narratives about young black men like you. And corruption protected racist officers like Wilson because they were useful tools. As Marcus absorbed this insight, Raymond received an urgent call from Agent Washington. Sir, we've found a connection between Governor Harrington and Dimitri's operation. 3 development companies that received state contracts are linked to the same shell corporations that paid Kendrick. And there's more. Michelle Chen was receiving instructions from someone in the federal prosecutor's office, not just Kendrick. The conspiracy was expanding beyond Atlanta, reaching into state government and possibly federal agencies. Raymond faced a momentous decision: continue following the evidence, regardless of where it led, potentially challenging the governor and federal officials, or accept the wins already secured and stop the investigation at the city level. The answer to Raymond was obvious: keep digging, Terrell, no matter where it leads. The truth about his son's shooting had evolved from a seemingly straightforward case of police racism to a complex web of corruption, power, and systemic discrimination that had infected multiple levels of government. And Raymond was determined to expose it all, regardless of the political consequences. The federal courtroom fell into complete silence as Marcus Johnson took the witness stand. At 16 now, having spent his birthday in recovery, he carried himself with a dignity beyond his years. The bullet wound in his chest had healed to a puckered scar, a permanent reminder of how close he had come to death on those courthouse steps. Raymond watched from the front row as his son raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth in the most significant corruption trial Atlanta had seen in decades. On trial were Commissioner Kendrick Judge Patterson, former Police Chief Hayes, and 6 other high-ranking officials charged with racketeering, conspiracy, witness tampering, and attempted murder. Wilson had already pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for his testimony, which had concluded the previous day. His account of the courthouse enforcement program had been damning, describing in clinical detail how witnesses in cases threatening Dimitri's drug operation or his political allies were systematically intimidated and, in some cases, eliminated. Now it was Marcus's turn to speak. "Please tell the court what happened on the morning of April 15th, the federal prosecutor requested. Marcus recounted the events with remarkable composure. The threatening messages he had received, Wilson's aggression the moment he reached for his phone, and the gunshot that had nearly ended his life. "Officer Wilson said something right before he shot me," Marcus testified. "He said, 'Wrong place, wrong kid.' At the time, I didn't understand what that meant." "And do you understand it now?" the prosecutor asked. Marcus nodded. "Yes, I wasn't his intended target. I was mistaken for another witness, someone who had information about Alexander Dimitri's drug operation. Wilson was supposed to intimidate or eliminate that person, but the court schedule had changed. The defense attorneys objected vigorously, but the testimony stood. The narrative of a racist officer shooting a black teenager remained true, but embedded within a larger truth about systematic corruption. The trial proceeded with mountain of evidence. Financial records showing millions flowing from Dimitri's shell companies to the defendant's phone records documenting the conspiracy, testimony from Officer Brennan and other officers who had finally broken their silence. Midway through the proceedings, Commissioner Kendrick's resolve crumbled. Facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of spending the remainder of his life in federal prison, he offered to cooperate in exchange for sentencing considerations. His testimony implicated officials even higher than those currently charged, including Governor Harrington and 3 federal prosecutors who had systematically declined to pursue cases against Dimitri's operation. "It was a perfect system," Kendrick explained under oath. "Dimitri provided the money, the governor provided political protection. I controlled the police response. Patterson handled the judicial side. We had every base covered." As the trial neared its conclusion, Raymond was called to Washington for an urgent meeting with the Attorney General and the FBI Director. The atmosphere in the wood-paneled office was tense with unspoken conflicts. "Raymond, the director, began your work on the Atlanta corruption case has been exemplary. The evidence is unassailable, the prosecutions are proceeding successfully, but there are complications regarding the allegations against Governor Harrington and the federal prosecutors." Raymond maintained a neutral expression. "The evidence against them is as strong as the evidence against Kendrick and the others. Financial records don't lie." The Attorney General leaned forward. "The political implications of prosecuting a sitting governor and members of our own Justice Department are extraordinary. The President himself has expressed concerns about the potential damage to public trust in our institutions." There it was, the familiar pressure to protect the powerful, to limit the scope of justice. Raymond had anticipated this moment and prepared his response carefully. "With respect, Madam Attorney General, public trust is damaged by corruption, not by prosecuting it. If we prosecute the local officials but protect the state and federal ones, we're simply participating in the same corrupt system at a higher level." The FBI director's expression hardened. That's easy to say when you're not considering the national implications. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices for the greater good. Raymond stood placing a sealed envelope on the desk. This contains my formal findings regarding Governor Harrington and the 3 federal prosecutors, along with my letter of resignation, effective immediately if you choose not to pursue these cases. I've prepared a detailed press statement explaining my resignation and the evidence we've gathered. The threat was clear: attempt to bury this part of the case, and Raymond would make it public in the most damaging way possible. The Attorney General studied him for a long moment. "You're risking your career on this, Raymond." "No," Raymond replied. "I'm doing my job. The risk to my career comes only if I fail to do it." After a tense silence, the Attorney General nodded slowly. "Prepare the indictments against Harrington and the others. But Raymond, there will be consequences. Political appointments, future promotions, those doors may close for you." Raymond accepted this with a slight nod. Some prices are worth paying. Back in Atlanta, the trial concluded with guilty verdicts against all defendants. At the sentencing hearing, Marcus asked to address the court. His statement, delivered with quiet strength, captured the attention of national media. "What happened to me wasn't just about racism, though that was real. It wasn't just about corruption, though that was real too. It was about how powerful people use our divisions and prejudices as tools to protect themselves. Officer Wilson shot me because I'm black, yes, but also because a corrupt system knew his racism made him useful. They knew his actions would be explained away as another racist cop, rather than exposing their larger criminal enterprise." As Marcus concluded his statement, the judge, specially appointed from another district to ensure impartiality, delivered the sentences. Commissioner Kendrick received 20 years. Judge Patterson, 18. The others received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. Wilson, despite his cooperation, was sentenced to 12 years. The judge noting that his racism had made him a willing tool of corruption rather than a reluctant participant. 1 year later, Raymond stood with Marcus on the steps of a new Police Oversight Commission building in downtown Atlanta. Governor Harrington and the corrupt federal prosecutors were now themselves being prosecuted their cases, proceeding despite intense political pressure. Raymond had indeed faced professional consequences, passed over for promotion to higher FBI positions, subtly excluded from Washington power circles. But he had remained in Atlanta working to rebuild the city's law enforcement from the ground up. Marcus, now 17 and fully recovered, had become a powerful voice for reform, speaking at schools and community centers about his experience and the larger issues it revealed. Together, they had established a youth leadership program focused on community oversight of policing, creating the next generation of engaged citizens who understood both the reality of racism and the complexity of institutional corruption. "Do you regret any of it?" Marcus asked his father as they stood looking at the building that represented their shared vision. "The career opportunities you lost," Raymond placed his hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the strength that had grown there over the past year. "Not for a second. Some things are worth more than advancement. Some prices are worth paying." As they walked inside to begin the commission's inaugural meeting, Raymond reflected on how a single moment of injustice, a racist officer pulling his trigger on the courthouse steps, had exposed a system of corruption that might otherwise have remained hidden for years. The truth had been complex, revealing how racism and corruption reinforced each other, how prejudice could be weaponized by the powerful, how systems protected themselves. And while justice had come at a personal cost, that price had purchased something beyond value, not just for Marcus and Raymond, but for an entire city beginning to heal. What would you do if faced with a similar choice between career advancement and pursuing justice? Have you ever witnessed corruption or discrimination that went unchallenged because powerful people protected each other? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of courage and the fight against systemic injustice moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories that mainstream media often overlooks. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how racism and corruption often work hand in hand. Thank you for listening, and remember, justice begins when ordinary people refuse to look away from uncomfortable truths. The badge of injustice reveals how racism and corruption often intertwine to create systems of oppression more powerful than either could achieve alone. In this story, Officer Wilson's racism made him the perfect tool for a corrupt system, His actions against Marcus could be dismissed as another racist cop rather than exposing the broader criminal network behind it. The story teaches us that fighting injustice requires addressing both individual prejudice and institutional corruption. Raymond Johnson couldn't just prosecute Wilson without dismantling the system that enabled him. Similarly, corruption thrives by exploiting existing societal divisions and biases. We also learn the importance of moral courage in the face of pressure. Raymond risked his career to pursue justice completely, rather than settling for partial victories that would have preserved the power structure. His integrity came at a professional cost, but preserved something more valuable: his principles and his son's faith in justice. Marcus's journey shows how survivors of injustice can transform their trauma into purpose. Rather than being defined as a victim, he became an agent of change, using his experience to educate others and reform systems. Finally, the story reminds us that true justice often requires looking beyond simple narratives to understand complex, uncomfortable truths about how power operates in our society. What systems of injustice exist in your community that go unchallenged because they're protected by powerful people? Have you ever witnessed racism being used as a cover for other forms of corruption? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever had to choose between personal advancement and standing up for what's right, share your experience. Your story might inspire others facing similar dilemmas. This story shows how courage can transform individual tragedy into collective progress. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose uncomfortable truths mainstream media often overlooks. Would you have the courage to sacrifice career opportunities to fight for justice like Raymond did, or the strength to transform trauma into activism like Marcus shared? This video with someone who needs inspiration to stand up against injustice in their own life. Thank you for listening, and remember, real change begins when we refuse to accept that this is just how things are.